Alright, what's happening, y'all? It's your boy Rico from RicoScores, and man, it was a busy night for the Washington Commanders. It was already rumored that Joe Whitt Jr. will become our defensive coordinator as of a couple of days ago, but nothing was official. I make sure I emphasize that in my previous video talking about him a couple of days ago. But then they went ahead and skipped ahead of that, went ahead and hired Cliff Kingsbury as our offensive coordinator. I've already done 2 videos breaking that down. If you haven't seen that yet, make sure you go back and check those out. The most recent one was more so a look at which quarterbacks are the best fit for Cliff Kingsbury's offense. That includes Sam Howell in that list as well. And then the previous video is more of a dive into Cliff Kingsbury's offense specifically, what it does, how it operates, a lot of stats and things like that. And then I'm gonna do a whole film session, hour long, all 22 breakdown of his offense. But now we're here to talk about the Washington Commanders officially hiring ex-Dallas Cowboys defensive pass game specialist Joe Whitt Jr., now hired as the defensive coordinator for the Washington Commanders. I'm super excited. A lot of people kind of expected Dan Quinn to bring him with him and give him that promotion, but it's still great that it's officially done because him and Dan Quinn as a combination is pretty deadly. We're going to dive into a lot of the elite stats that they've produced together the past 3 years since being together in Dallas. Also, it kind of says something that everywhere Dan Quinn has been, he's brought Joe Whitt Jr. with him no matter what, whatever it takes. Also, them as a pair, the way that they've developed players for defenses, all levels, especially the linebacker group in the secondary, we got to talk about that. Also, is this a home run hire? Is this one of the most underrated hires of this entire offseason? Because I'm telling y'all, Joe Whitt Jr. and Dan Quinn as a combination, beautiful. And we got to talk about how he's even a perfect personality match to go along with Dan Quinn. We'll talk about that at the end. But before we dive into all of that, all of the stats that I'm gonna bring in and everything like that, make sure you still farm that like button, still farm the subscription button, and still farm the bell next to that subscription button so you get notification each and every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one. Make sure you stay tuned because I'm coming with constant updates. I mean, I'm recording this right now at 1:18 a.m., but y'all will probably get this by say like 9-10 a.m. And then we have the Dan Quinn Adam Peters press conference at 2:30 p.m. so I need to be ready. I'm gonna be busy, so I may be a little late to it, but I do want to do a breakdown of some of the most quotable and noteworthy things that comes from that press conference. Their plan for positional coaches, where they may potentially be looking into doing things as far as free agency draft, what's their strategy, what's their game plan. Of course, they're not going to completely show their hand, but there's always a lot to dive into when it comes to those press conferences, so stay tuned for that video as well later on during the day, later in the evening type of thing. And like I said, I've been working on mock drafts. I was literally ready to basically do a video on a Dan Quinn 7-round mock draft today. All this other stuff pushed that back, and then now that we've hired Cliff Kingsbury, I needed to work on a mock draft for him. So be on the lookout for some future mock drafts very soon as well, and make sure y'all stay tuned for all of the content. But let's go ahead and get to this video right here, the most important thing. Let's get it. All right, so the Washington Commanders have officially hired Cowboys secondary coach and defensive pass game coordinator Joe Whitt Jr. for the defensive coordinator job. And Joe Whitt Jr. following Dan Quinn to the Washington Commanders as a defensive coordinator is pretty big because the Cowboys clearly wanted to keep him. They hoped that they could keep him, and Dan Quinn, like he's always done, takes him everywhere that he goes, because this is the 3rd time that Quinn has now hired Joe Whitt Jr. He took him with him to Atlanta. That was the first time. Then he brought him from Atlanta to the Dallas Cowboys, and now he's taking him from Dallas to the DMV area to coach the Washington Commanders, and he's getting again a promotion from defensive passing game coordinator to the full-blown defensive coordinator. Now, of course, Dan Quinn is more than likely still going to call the plays for the defense and all of that type of stuff, but that's still a pretty big promotion, and you never know if Joe Whitt Jr. does a great enough job. I know we talk about offensive coordinators being snatched from organizations left and right. You never know, man. Joe Whitt Jr. may be one of those prodigies again, one of those elite minds that maybe we're looking for a new defensive coordinator within like the next couple of years because he does that great of a job. Either way, it's really hard to tell who's done exactly what. Again, we're going to break down one big separation between the two, and it's a personality thing, which is huge, which is why I'm super excited to have Joe Whitt Jr. come along with Dan Quinn, because Dan Quinn himself is great, especially defensively, but Joe Whitt Jr. literally completes them. They're the perfect match for each other. We'll talk about that later, but when it comes to a lot of little things, it's hard to exactly know who did what, but I know with those two as a combination, we don't even have to worry about separating the two because they're both here, and what they've produced statistically and development wise on the defensive side for the Cowboys, taking them from bad to great to elite in certain ways, is huge, man. So again, it's no use in trying to figure out what Dan Quinn does, what Joe Whitt Jr. does, because either way, both of them together has produced an elite defense. I'm super excited. And then Adam Peters building the team. The Adam Peters, the one that's arguably the best talent evaluator in the NFL, at least rounds 4 through 7, 3 through 7, whatever you want to give him credit for, finding Pro Bowlers and All Pros in the day 3 of the draft. Come on, bro. Imagine that behind this machine, on this coaching staff, this development. I'm already excited about Cliff Kingsbury, but you bring Joe Whitt Jr. with Dan Quinn, this defense is going to be way better than what it's been. We're going to talk about how players even feel about this situation. Now, Micah Parsons feels about it. Emmanuel Forbes already tweeted about it. This is going to be fun. But yeah, man, Joe Whitt Jr. gets a lot of credit for doing a great job with the Cowboys secondary the past couple of years. And most importantly, again, the Cowboys wanted to keep him. And when you're taking away from the Cowboys while also adding to the Commanders, that's a double win. The Cowboys wanted to keep him for a reason, so we should be excited about the fact that we're taking somebody from the Cowboys that they wanted. That's just an extra little bit of seasoning on top. Also, this guy has coached a lot of different places. He's had an impact everywhere he's gone. And it's actually crazy, too, because the majority of his career he spent at Green Bay. And if you note, we're going to talk about him really soon. Al Harris, who a lot of people is looking at as like the Sean McVay of defensive coaches type of thing. He's this prodigy guy that, like, once he gets the right opportunity, he's going to show you he's an elite defensive mind. Some people think that he could even be like the next Mike McDonald type of thing. Ironically, Joe Whitt Jr. was his coach back when Al Harris was a cornerback. And Joe Whitt Jr. goes all the way back to coaching Charles Woodson for the Green Bay Packers as well. So he's done a lot of great work with the Green Bay Packers. The highest he ever reached with the Green Bay Packers was defensive passing game coordinator. And then he had that same role along with secondaries coach for the Cleveland Browns. Then he went to the Falcons, did the same thing under Dan Quinn. Went to the Cowboys, did the same thing under Dan Quinn. And now he gets his first big promotion, his first opportunity of being a defensive coordinator with the Washington Commanders. Again, he won't necessarily like call the plays. I'm pretty sure Dan Quinn is still going to do that, but that's still a big time promotion. This is his first shot at defensive coordinator. I think he's going to do a great job. Now, going back to Al Harris just real quick before we dive into the stats and everything, and as to why this combination of Dan Quinn and Joe Whitt Jr. is going to be insane, especially for the development of these young Commanders defensive players that we have not gotten the most out of, like I hope we should, especially these first round picks, and especially the secondary. But going back to Al Harris real quick, go ahead and bring him over too. Because with Harris and how people look at him like the next defensive genius, again, some people think he's like, could potentially be the next Mike McDonald type of guy, literally like the Sean McVay of defensive coaches type of thing. Bringing him over would be huge as well. Now, he may not stay long because, again, with a lot of people looking at him like that guy, and if he is that guy, and if he comes over here and does such a great job, then he may get taken within the next couple of years. But either way, another guy that we would take from the Cowboys, because I think the Cowboys are probably even looking at potentially, some people have had talks about promoting him straight up from just secondaries coach to defensive coordinator, skip all of the steps. Like, this is the next potentially Mike McDonald type of guy. So to take that guy from the Cowboys and add him to the Commanders is another big win for us if we could do it. But I believe the Cowboys have the right to block him if they choose to do so, and I'm pretty sure they would. But man, that would be huge. We would only probably have him for a couple of years because, again, a lot of people look at him and hold him to that high of a regard. But I mean, he would get a slight promotion coming here, even though the Cowboys, again, with Joe Whitt Jr. gone and Dan Quinn, defensive coordinator, secondaries coach slash defensive passing game coordinator, all of that gone, there's nobody left above him. He could just go ahead and move straight to defensive coordinator. So he could take a bigger promotion to stay with the Cowboys, but there's still a slight promotion in it for him if he would have come to the Commanders, because Dan Quinn is now going from defensive coordinator to head coach. Joe Whitt is going from his job to what he was doing for the Cowboys to taking what Dan Quinn was doing for the Cowboys over here for the Commanders. And then Al Harris could follow in his footsteps. Everybody just taking one step up. Then Al Harris could come here and do what Joe Whitt Jr. was doing for the Cowboys over here for the Commanders. So even though it wouldn't be, we can't offer him as big of a promotion as the Cowboys potentially could, but maybe he just loves Joe Whitt Jr. and Dan Quinn enough to just take a slight promotion and then just wait his turn to prove himself to go become a big-time defensive coordinator somewhere. Maybe the Cowboys aren't willing to give him a defensive coordinator promotion, and I hope not, because if they aren't, please bring Al Harris over. But back to the combination of Dan Quinn and Joe Whitt Jr., because that's the most important part of this video. I don't want to make this Al Harris video. We can maybe do that later. But Dan Quinn and Joe Whitt Jr. have done great things for the Cowboys defense. Before they got there, the Cowboys defense was bad, like bottom half of the league bad, bottom 10 in a lot of stats. And then in the 3 seasons that Dan Quinn and Joe Whitt Jr. have been controlling this Cowboys defense, they've ranked top 10 each year in points allowed and led the NFL in takeaways twice, in the 2021 season, the 2022 season, and then they were top, I believe, 5 in the 2023 season that just passed, or somewhere near the top half of the league at the very least. Matter of fact, to break it down, 2021 they were 7th in points per game allowed, only allowing 21.1. They were 19th in yards per game allowed, 351.0. So you could argue that they were like a bend but don't break type of defense, but they were first in takeaways, and that's where it came from. They were allowing all of those yards, but they didn't allow points because they were first in takeaways with 34. Then the next year, and again, 2021 was the first year that Dan Quinn became their defensive coordinator, with Joe Whitt Jr. being his right-hand man. That was the first year of taking over a bad defense, immediate production, immediate results, immediate development, all of that type of stuff. And so that's, again, the reason that I'm pretty excited about this Dan Quinn and Cliff Kingsbury, Joe Whitt Jr., all of these hires, is because all of these guys have evidence of turning a team around immediately. Cliff Kingsbury did that with the Arizona Cardinals offense. They went from bad to good to great at times. Kyler Murray to MVP level at certain times. But Dan Quinn becoming the Falcons head coach, taking them from 4 wins to the Super Bowl within 2 years. Now, granted, 28-3, yeah, of course, but he took a team that won 4 games and took it to a Super Bowl within 2 years. That's amazing. And then same thing with Dan Quinn and Joe Whitt Jr. taking over that bad Cowboys defense and immediately turning them to a top 10 defense in the NFL, number 1 in takeaways within just 1 year. That's amazing. So if we're looking at the Commanders and how bad we've been, I know we want to go to the Super Bowl as soon as possible. I know we want to be a contender as soon as possible. But at the very least, as a floor, with Dan Quinn and Joe Whitt Jr. controlling the defense, this defense is going to go from being the league's worst last year to, at the very least, top 15 and top 10 within just 1 year. It's not going to take 2 years like a lot of people assume it will with most coaches. Dan Quinn has shown that he could go to a team and make them immediately competitive at the very least. We'll talk about Super Bowl contenders. We're talking about division winners later. We'll see about that, but we're not going to be at the top of the draft again come 2025 draft. That just won't. I'll put money on that. It would have to be something catastrophic to take place, because Dan Quinn and Joe Whitt Jr. have shown everywhere they go, they turn a team around immediately, and that's why I really like these hires, especially now looking back at it a little bit more, doing a little bit more research. Of course, Dan Quinn wasn't the most exciting hire, but he was the safest. Cliff Kingsbury comes with a little bit of risk, and Joe Whitt Jr. adds a little bit more excitement there as well. So I already gave you 2021. Let's go to 2022, because that shows consistency. It's not just taking a bad team and making them great. How long can we stay great? Well, 2022, they were even better than 2021. 2022, they were 6th in points per game allowed. They went up 1 spot there. Then they were 12th in yards per game allowed, went up 7 spots there. And then they were still number 1 in takeaways out of the entire NFL with 33, with only 1 less than the previous year. Then 2023, they were 5th in points per game allowed, the best out of any of the 3 seasons. They were 5th in yards per game allowed, again, the best out of any of the seasons. They did a 7-spot jump year to year from 19th to 12th to 5th in yards per game allowed. They did a 1-spot jump every year in points per game allowed, 7th to 6th to 5th. That's just constant progress and improvement. And then 2023, they actually ended up being tied for 12th in takeaways with 26th. But who are we to complain? That's still great, way better than anything we've done anytime recently. We were tied for second last, I believe, in takeaways this past season. Just absolutely terrible. I don't even think we hit 20. So I'm super excited about that. And just to look at it from a different way, and this is a Cowboys fan tweeting this. He said, I remember when getting takeaways was a rarity in Dallas. When Quinn arrived, the Cowboys were at the top of the league every year in that department. I'd be careful cheering for his departure as a Cowboys fan. He's basically saying, we don't know how good we've had it. Now, granted, one big downside to Dan Quinn, it seems like whenever the lights are at their brightest, his defense, his teams, whatever, just collapse. I don't know what it is. It happened with the Falcons, 28-3, all of that type of stuff, even though it wasn't anywhere near as bad for the Falcons as it was for the Cowboys. But then again, the Cowboys are known for doing that my entire lifetime. So maybe that was more so a Cowboys thing than a Dan Quinn thing, but maybe it still is a little bit of a Dan Quinn thing. But either way, man, he comes in and makes your defense immediately better. I wouldn't be surprised to see the Cowboys regress and go back to exactly how they were before Dan Quinn got there, which is basically how we just basically were last year. And then now we're going to be as good as what the Cowboys defense was the past couple of years. We're probably going to switch spaces in that way, and I'm super excited about it. And again, that's a Cowboys fan pointing that out. Yeah, I know a lot of Cowboys fans are excited to see Dan Quinn leave, but be careful what you ask for, because before we got here, before he came to the Cowboys, before he went to the Cowboys, we were not getting takeaways. And what fan base does that sound like complaining about takeaways? That sounds literally like the Commanders fan base. Cowboys fans don't know how good they had it lately. So it's going to be really interesting to see what they look like after losing Dan Quinn and how we're going to look gaining them. Also, the Commanders, again, like I said, we're second to last in takeaways last year, after we drafted a corner in the first round to help exactly that. He wasn't the best cover corner. He wasn't the best run defensive corner. He wasn't the best man corner. He wasn't the best zone corner. What he was known for the most, the thing he could hang his hat on, was creating turnovers, and he did not even do that, which I love about Dan Quinn, because they don't necessarily draft a turnover creator. They scheme and develop a turnover creator. They bring that, instead of overreacting and going to get a guy that was setting records for interceptions in college, they go find a guy that's a better cover corner, and then they turn him into that turnover machine. I prefer that. I'm really excited. But now that we already have Emmanuel Forbes, hopefully they can fix that situation. But I just absolutely love it, because we drafted Emmanuel Forbes, who's better in zone, tried to force him to play man as much as possible. Then you benched him even when the game results didn't even matter. Win or loss, it's like we might as well play all of our talent as much as possible, especially the younger guys, so they can develop. The more they play, the better they get. Emmanuel Forbes sitting on the sideline isn't making them any better. So I'm so glad we're done with that. No more idiotic decisions. No more decisions that we just look at like Rivera, like what Jack DeVille, what are we doing here? Basically, no more of that. And I'm just excited about that alone. Also, under Dan Quinn and Joe Whitt Jr., the Cowboys led the NFL in takeaways, sacks, and defensive touchdowns over the past 3 seasons. They also had 2 different players, Trevon Diggs and Deron Bland, lead the NFL in interceptions. So I'm looking at Emmanuel Forbes like, hey man, this is your chance. I'm tapped, bro. The combination of Joe Whitt Jr. and Dan Quinn had a 5th round rookie cornerback in Deron Bland out here breaking NFL records. Come on, bro. Like, that's the coaching, that's the development, that's the scheme that we're gaining for the Commanders. I'm super excited because, I mean, now we do need to address some talent in the defense, but I feel like we're not just completely devoid of talent. I don't feel like we had a bottom 10, bottom 5 of the league talent. I just felt like they just weren't coached to the best of their ability. I feel like we weren't maximizing the talent that we did have. We still have some areas that we need to address. We still have a lot of talent that we need to get edge rusher in free agency and the draft. We need to get secondary players to help. We need to get more linebackers for agency and the draft as well. But I don't necessarily feel like it's only a talent problem is my main point. I feel like Dan Quinn and Joe Whitt Jr. could have had that same roster from last year, and we would have been somewhere at the very least in the middle of the NFL and a lot of statistics, not dead last. So I'm really excited about what they could do for us here. And again, just to dive even deeper into the takeaways part of this, where we're getting to Dan Quinn and especially in Joe Whitt Jr. joining Dan Quinn, Dallas led the NFL in takeaways with 93 these past 3 seasons since Dan Quinn and Joe Whitt Jr. went to coach for the Dallas Cowboys. They were the only team with 90 plus over that 3-season span, these past 3 seasons. So there's like a considerable gap. It was the Cowboys with the most takeaways, big gap, Everybody else, nobody else even had 90 over the last 3 years. They have been the best takeaway defense, turnover creation defense in the NFL easily since Dan Quinn has gotten there. Again, they look a little funny in the light when it matters most sometimes when we get to the playoffs, but just, I mean, hats off to everybody that's just done a great job going against that defense and scheming up against them. As I talked about in my previous Joe Whitt Jr., no, I think it was my Dan Quinn video, I broke down and gave you exact stats about how Cowboys defense is elite against everybody except for Kyle Shanahan coaching tree guys. And as long as we can fix that, this defense, we don't have to worry about them being funny in the light. Because, of course, Matt LaFleur, Kyle Shanahan, coaching tree, everybody, Sean McVay, coaching tree, all of that type of stuff. Everybody that comes from that style of offense is killing the Dallas Cowboys, Dan Quinn and Joe Whitt Jr. to be specific. But if there were anybody that knew how to build the exact counter to that, it's Adam Peters, who helped build Kyle Shanahan, that elite anti-Cowboys Dan Quinn and Joe Whitt Jr. offense that they created over there. So if anybody can figure out how to stop the Kyle Shanahan coaching tree, it's Adam Peters, or at the very least knows how to build a team that knows how to stop it, because he knows them inside and out. He helped draft and bring in a lot of their elite players, and he's probably going to come over here and be like, all right, this is what they're weak at. We're going to build a team that directly counters that. So when we run into these Kyle Shanahan offenses, no more problems for you guys. I'm hoping that that's the way that can be done. If anybody can help him, it's Adam Peters. I'm super excited about that. And remember, like I talked about in my last Joe Whitt Jr. video, when it was rumored that he would be our defensive coordinator, again, he's a perfect personality match for Dan Quinn, man. Because Dan Quinn is the emotional fire. Joe Whitt is like the calm, collected, logical counter to Dan Quinn's passion. Always level-headed. And you need both of those guys to succeed. You need a Dan Quinn that players love to play for, willing to run through a brick wall, speak out on his behalf on Twitter, everywhere you look. And then you also need the Joe Whitt Jr. to be the logical guy to keep everything together, play by play, to look ahead into the future. Because Joe Whitt Jr. in an interview even brought up a situation where the Cowboys got a pick six and Dan Quinn was just too busy. He was fired up and he was celebrating with the team and things like that. He wasn't even worried about X's and O's. He was just, I mean, you need that. You need the guy that's going to celebrate with the team as a coach. And you need the guy that's thinking on to the next play. So here comes Joe Whitt Jr. already thinking about the next play. And he thought about the fact that, hey, wait, Deron Bland was the one that just had that pick six, right? And we also play him on special teams. We should not throw him out there on special teams immediately after being exhausted from running back a pick six. So let's sit Deron Bland for special teams this time, just because he probably needs to get a little bit of rest right now, and we don't want to send him out there to make a mistake, and then after we got a pick six because Deron Bland is out there exhausted, he misses on his assignment, and now the opposing team is running back a kick return for a touchdown. That's the type of stuff that Joe Whitt Jr. contributes. Dan Quinn is handling this. Joe Whitt Jr. is the mathematician behind the scenes, the mad scientist thinking ahead into the future, the guy keeping everything together. He's the glue. So I love that, man. I love a Dan Quinn passionate defense, and I love the fact that he has a Joe Whitt Jr. to make sure everything is running smoothly along the way. And again, if there's any coaching staff that can finally unlock the potential of an Emmanuel Forbes, Quan Martin, Derek Forrest, Percy Butler, all of these like athletic, fast, speedy, quick, strong guys that just like have natural talent, but we just got to figure out the X's and O's. We got to get the communication. We got to get the chemistry down pat. If there's any coaching staff that can figure that out and solve that problem for us, it's this one, because Dan Quinn doesn't have all of those communication errors, people wide open down the field, coverage busts that we're used to for the Commanders. You don't see the Dallas Cowboys doing that much at all. If somebody's open, it's just because somebody usually just got beat. They play more man coverage than we have under Ron Rivera and Jack Del Rio. But there's just, as far as the coaching side of things, no more coverage busts. At least at a much smaller rate than what we've been watching as Commanders fans, again, under Ron Rivera and Jack Del Rio for the past few years. Also, I feel like we'll finally value the linebacker position, y'all. Because the linebacker position has had a big renaissance lately. I don't know if y'all noticed, and I've already pointed out how a lot of the playoff teams had great tight ends. It looked like it was like a tight end playoffs this year. But I felt like quiet as kept, it was a linebacker playoff as well. You can see that everywhere you look, a lot of those top teams in the playoffs, if you're looking at the teams in the Super Bowl right now, it's great linebacker play. And they may not necessarily have an all-pro, but the linebacker group is very good. And it's crazy that we had ex-linebacker Ron Rivera, ex-linebacker Jack Del Rio, and we just completely ignored that position. So I'm super happy that we have a coaching staff on the defensive side of the ball that's no longer going to overlook that. We're going to actually address that. And then who we already have, and hopefully if we re-sign like a Khaleke Hudson and what we already have in Jamin Davis, I think they're going to maximize those talents, because the speed of a Jamin Davis, the athleticism of Jamin Davis, when we talk about ceiling with him coming out of the draft and things like that, I feel like if anybody can tap into that and finally make him look like somewhat of a first round pick, is this coaching staff. If anybody can, is this one. Otherwise, Jamin Davis is just never destined to be good. If Dan Quinn and Joe Whitt Jr. can't get it out of him, nobody basically can, is my point. Which takes me to the next point. All of these first round picks that it feels like we've wasted on just defensive talent that have underperformed, I feel like this is the coaching staff to unlock that. So we're talking Emmanuel Forbes, Jamin Davis, all of those guys. I mean, sadly, maybe if Chase Young or Montez Sweat was still here, I would expect them to have better seasons under this coaching staff as well. But Jamin Davis, first round pick, Emmanuel Forbes, first round pick. If anybody can get first round pick production out of them, first round pick talent, all of that type of stuff, consistency at the very least, it's this coaching staff, because Dan Quinn and Joe Whitt Jr. do a great job of putting people in places where they can succeed. I'm super excited about that. And speaking of being excited, Emmanuel Forbes has already tweeted with excitement about the Dan Quinn and Joe Whitt Jr. hires. So I'm super excited as well, because he knows. He even knows. He watches tape. All of these players watch tape on other teams, their opponents and all that type of stuff. He watches tape. He's probably watched a lot of Cowboys tape like, man, like, I wish I could be coached by that. And now he gets to be, so I know he's excited. And with Washington players excited, that also must mean that Cowboys players are not, because while we're gaining them, they're losing them. And that is true. Micah Parsons already spoke about potentially following Dan Quinn wherever he would go like a while ago. And then after we made the hire official for Dan Quinn as our head coach, he told the Commanders, take care of my guy type of thing. So who knows, maybe Micah Parsons to the Commanders later on, like I already broke down in my previous video talking about Joe Whitt Jr. I mean, us landing Dan Quinn and Joe Whitt Jr. does make us more likely to end up with a Micah Parsons, but don't expect it anytime soon. Now, you never know. Maybe we put together a trade package to get him. I doubt it, because that would take a lot. But he still has his fifth-year option, which I'm pretty sure the Cowboys are going to pick up. And then after that, they could potentially franchise tag him. So I don't expect him to be a free agent within like the next 2 years or something like that at the very soonest. So don't expect like, oh, we got Dan Quinn, Joe Whitt Jr., Micah Parsons on the way very soon. It's not like that, but you never know. Maybe he can do a whole sit-in type of thing, like trade me. I'm not playing for y'all. I want to go play for him. It could get to that point. I doubt it, but you just never know. Also, this also takes me to the point that this combination of Dan Quinn and Joe Whitt Jr. and the scheme that they use and their ability to develop guys the right way and maximize their talents and stuff like that, this will make the Commanders a big-time free agency destination for, at the very least, on the defensive side. We'll see what Cliff Kingsbury does on the offense side. We'll see what Adam Peters does, because he has some of the best relationships with agents between him, Bob Myers, and Rick Spielman. We got agents on lock. We don't have to worry about relationships with agents and players and things like that. We got that. So we'll see if Cliff Kingsbury is good enough scheme-wise and all that type of stuff to potentially bring in some good offensive talent in free agency to attract it at the very least. But I know for a fact on the defensive side of the ball, players love Dan Quinn and Joe Whitt Jr. Cowboys players love them. Players from other teams have acknowledged how great their scheme is. We're going to be a free agency destination for defenders. So a guy like Brian Burns or Josh Allen, maybe they're looking like, hey, I'd be willing to go play for Dan Quinn and Joe Whitt Jr. for slightly less money than I would be willing to take to play elsewhere, to return to my current team right now. Especially Brian Burns, because he said in his exit interview, as soon as the season ended, like in the locker room after their final game, when David Tepper is pouring liquor on opponents' fans for talking trash, like not acting like a professional owner at all, Brian Burns in the locker room talking about he doesn't feel like he's a priority to this team, and we haven't even talked contracts. It seems like they're overlooking me. So he doesn't even feel wanted there. So I wouldn't be surprised if he's willing to take a slightly less money with us rather than staying with Carolina with all of that turmoil and chaos they got going on over there. David Tepper, your owner, all of that type of stuff. No draft picks to potentially make the team better and things like that. And then on top of that, we have more cap space than everybody else in the NFL. So unless like the Jaguars franchise tag Josh Allen or the Carolina Panthers franchise tag Brian Burns or something like that, or another elite edge rusher gets franchise tagged, we have the most money in the most cap space to offer any of those guys. So if they want to get paid the most money they potentially could, we have the best ability to give them that if we want to go that route. I'm not sure if we will. I don't think we're just going to get into money battles with people, especially within our first year of everybody coming in. Adam Peters seems like the type of guy. I've already done a full history and dive into like how he's made decisions for the 49ers in previous years. Yeah, he's willing to make blockbuster trades. He's willing to sign top free agents if that's what it takes, but he typically waits until he has what already looks like a potential contender, and then he's like, okay, well, we'll make this splash signing or trade to fill in the biggest weakness that we have. I don't think he would necessarily do that just yet because this is his first year taking over, but who knows? You never know. We may get aggressive. And again, to my main point, Dan Quinn and Joe Whitt Jr., it's just that type of scheme, that type of coaching is going to make players want to come play for us. And we all know how that's been for the Commanders. Players don't want to play for us, and when they do, they charge us an arm and a leg. They'll charge us more money for that contract because they basically go into it like, well, if I'm going to play for the Commanders or the Burgundy Gold, the Redskins, whatever it's been for the past few years, if I'm going to come play for y'all, I know this is destined to fail. This team has no recent history of winning or players having great stats, making Pro Bowls and things like that. So I'm going to charge y'all extra money because I'm going into this situation knowing that my career is probably going to hit a dead end when I come here. This is the complete opposite of that. Players may take even less money to come play for us now. Again, especially on the defensive side of the ball. Super excited about that because if Adam Peters doesn't want to bargain bin shop like Ron Rivera and Jack Del Rio and all those guys were doing the past few years, he has the ability to go get top guys because now the Burgundy and Gold is a place where top guys may actually want to go play. I'm super excited about that. But yeah, man, that's the end of this video. Please get in the comment section. Let me know how you feel about everything discussed in this video. Please stiff arm that like button, stiff arm the subscription button, and stiff arm the bell next to that subscription button so you get notification each and every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one. I appreciate y'all. Again, stay patient with me because I'm working on mock drafts. I may be a little later than everybody else when it comes to breaking down that press conference because I'm going to be very busy tomorrow. Hopefully I'm home when that happens. We'll see, but just be on the lookout for a full breakdown of the Dan Quinn, Adam Peters initial press conference with Dan Quinn hires the head coach. Maybe Cliff Kingsbury will be there. Maybe Joe Whitt Jr. will be there. I'm not sure how likely that is, but either way, no matter what, just be on the lookout for a breakdown of all of the most notable and noteworthy things. I'm going to do like a deep dive. We're going to do like a read in between the lines thing because I know they're going to try to keep it political, very vanilla and plain with their answers, but we're gonna dive deeper beyond the surface. We're gonna dig deeper than that and try to put two and two together and see what we can take away, anything noteworthy from that press conference. And of course, again, I'm working on mock drafts. I'm working on a Dan Quinn mock draft that I was literally almost finished and ready to record, and then all of this happened, so that set all of that back. And then I'm also working on a mock draft for Cliff Kingsbury, so be on the lookout for that because that's gonna be an offensive driven one. The Dan Quinn one that's coming out before that is gonna be more defensive driven, but not even just completely defense. It's going to be like very specific. Dan Quinn prefers man coverage. That's why they lead the league in takeaways because they're a very aggressive defense that plays man coverage way more than a lot of other teams do. We're going to draft guys that fit that scheme better, guys that are willing to take risks, play man coverage, things like that. We're going to try to find some edge rusher talent that fits because everywhere so far, Dan Quinn, what he's done for the Dallas Cowboys having Micah Parsons as his edge rusher, he doesn't have that here. He needs to go get that guy. Same thing with Adam Peters. Even on his end, when he was building that great Denver Broncos team, Von Miller was his elite edge rusher. Since he's been with the 49ers, Nick Bosa has been his elite edge rusher. Again, we don't have that guy, so they need to go get that guy. So be on the lookout. It's going to be very specific like that. And same thing with Cliff Kingsbury's mock draft. It's not just going to be, oh, draft a bunch of offensive players. No, we're going to get guys that are perfect in the air raid system, guys that usually come from the air raid system in college, all of that type of stuff. Guys that will be seamless fits that we can expect to come in day one and contribute immediately, especially at the receiver position, all that type of stuff. So stay tuned for all of that. Really appreciate y'all. Stay patient with me. Try my best to try to read and reply to as many comments as possible. Make sure you let me know how you feel about everything discussed in this video, whether you agree or disagree with any of my points. Add any additional points that I may not have brought up. I appreciate it. Any stats, all of that. Catch y'all later. I'm out.